Thank you so much, everyone, for joining us. Fantastic to have you here. Delighted to introduce Eloise Singer of Singer Studios, here to talk to Bruce Grove of Ansible Comms. I guess about 10 things Eloise had wished they'd known as a studio founder, for others to sort of get started on their journey as well. So do you want to introduce yourselves to the audience, and then Bruce, I guess, sort of take it away with your first question.
Go for it. So I'll do a quick intro to everyone here, but I'm Bruce Grove. As mentioned, I work with Ansible Comms, doing a lot of work around helping startups, advising, angel investing, where they're going next, scale up team structure, and some of those classic things. Having been a founder myself, exited a company myself, and most recently I've been CTO for Avantis Education, which is VR in classrooms, Gloucester-based UK success story with a global footprint in schools. And that was what led me, as I was looking for more amazing content to bring into the classrooms. I came across Singer Studios and what Eloise was doing, and was immediately struck by this incredible content that they were building for VR that wasn't just interactive. It wasn't just, here's a game that we can put into a headset, but it was so detailed. It was so educational, and it was so well put together, and the storytelling was amazing, and the production, the values. And I immediately reached out to Eloise and Siobhan at the time and some of the team to talk more about it. And that was how we got introduced. And so I'm super excited to be having this conversation with Eloise, because I think the things that Singer Studios are doing is incredible. I love watching everything they're doing. And so now I'm going to let Eloise introduce herself, a little bit about your background and what you've been doing.
Thank you. Thank you. That was a beautiful introduction. I'm Eloise. I founded a company called Singer Studios about over 8 years ago now, which is bizarre, and terrifying how time flies. My background comes from film. So I worked at Pinewood Studios, and I worked on a bunch of different productions, from Ready Player One to The Crown to British Bake Off to Transformers to Baywatch, to La La Land, like literally sort of big and small productions. And then I took the leap of deciding to set up my own company. And at first we produced a lot of films. So we produced a film with Billy Piper called Rare Beasts. And then we produced another film called The Last Rifleman with Pierce Brosnan. And then in about 2020, when the pandemic struck, I was developing a film called The Pirate Queen, and we realized that we couldn't keep working on the film. And I had previously met a chap called Dave Ranyard, who was the head of PlayStation Studios in London, and he had said to me at the time, what if you made this into a game? And I was like, oh, I love games, but I've never worked in games. I've never, I didn't even know what Unreal Engine was at the time. Like, I knew nothing. But serendipity kind of just occurred, and we got some funding from the UK. What was it? Creative England, New Ideas funding. And we turned Pirate Queen into a game, and then it went on to get nominated for an Emmy, and now we're turning it into a show, and we've just released our second VR project called Trailblazer with Daisy Ridley. So it's been a amazing and fascinating journey to get here, and a bit of a whirlwind of the last 8 years, I guess.
But and I love the way you casually say, and then we released this game and we got an Emmy, and just, I mean, it's an amazing journey. It's an amazing story. It sort of leads into some of the questions that we want to go into here and talk about as we go through this. But we talked about this a little bit a few days ago, and it's like, you've just come back from Cannes. So tell us a little bit about why you were in Cannes and what was going on there.
It was a very surreal and kind of amazing experience, but we were invited to premiere Trailblazer, which is our latest VR project at Cannes. And it was an interesting one because having come from the film world, I've been to Cannes every year. It's a bit like going to GDC. And this year was kind of the first year where we had a project and we were premiering. And so it was a completely different experience. And it was one of those moments that I think this industry is so hard and there's so many difficulties and challenges. And I don't know, it's a weird anecdote, but literally as we were getting on the plane to get to Cannes, we still hadn't like fixed Trailblazer. Like there were still problems. The project was still crashing. Like I was literally in the airport with a headset testing it, like texting our programmer being like, dude, this is still like crashing and I don't know what to do. And I'm freaking out. And thankfully, literally, we premiered it the next day, and overnight we managed to fix the crash, which was literally a small miracle. But I think we work so hard, and this industry is so hard, and it was kind of amazing just to take a moment of being able to celebrate the successes, because I don't think we do it enough. So I think it is something that if there was like the first lesson that I've learned, it's just to celebrate the wins, like celebrate even the big or small ones, but just take a moment and celebrate, because it is hard. So it's nice when you get
Yes.
to...
And I think that's an important one. And I think you hear people talk about this and they say, celebrate your successes. And it can kind of be hard and you get lost in the noise of what's going on. But you're a founder, you've built a studio, you have this team around you, and you're also the one that's right at the front a lot of the time. You're taking all the hard knocks first and you're trying to protect your team and make sure everything moves forward. And it can feel very, very relentless. And you sometimes also don't realize that the team behind you is, as well as supporting you, but they're taking some of that on board as well. They can see it through you. They can see what you're going through. They know how hard you're fighting. And those moments of success are so important. And they really help form that bond within the studio. They form that sort of team that comes together and says, actually, this is why we're doing this. We're pushing the boundaries of everything we want to get to so that we have these moments, because those moments are the things you remember. I've been through many startups and some of them have had some pretty rocky rides along the way. But those moments of success are always the ones that when you come back together, you go, do you remember when we did this? Do you remember when we launched OnLive at GDC? It was this insane event that was just sort of took over GDC and everyone. It was just sort of the adrenaline, the rush, the feeling from that moment. And you take that as the sort of, those are the big wins. They're the moments in your career where you go, this is why we're doing this. This is why we want to do this.
Completely. And I think it's also like that idea of it is being able to come together. I mean, I was getting on the flight with our composer, who's one of my absolute best friends. And I was like, dude, one day we're going to be laughing about the fact that we're going to CAD with a project that doesn't work and showing it tomorrow. But today is not the day. And he was just amazing. And he just turned to me and he was like, it's all good. Like, it's all going to be okay. It's going to be okay. And I think when you build that, and it's that idea of being able to be in the trenches together and also celebrate together, and that's what like builds your team, and those are the people that you want around you as well, I think.
Yeah, definitely. You talk about Trailblazer and you talk about the Pirate Queen. Tell me a little bit about what created those stories. Where did they come from? We think about sort of women in innovation. We think about women who have been great pioneers and absolute movers and shakers. And you're presenting new stories about women that many people will never have heard of before or never realized just how influential they were as part of these journeys. And how did you come to sort of make that the thing you were going to come towards and build upon?
I think for Pirate Queen, everything that we do is sort of finding untold stories and trying to shape perspectives. And I think the last two projects that we made are very much focused on like women from history. And in a way, like actually our next project isn't a woman. It's a woman, but it's not a woman from history. But I think for Pirate, it's always just driven by this like need to tell the story. And the thing that I've learned, again, like it's all so hard. And you need to ask yourself, like, why am I doing this? Like, why am I creating the thing that I'm creating? Because when it gets really, really, really hard and it's like 2 o'clock in the morning and something isn't working or something's gone wrong, and you're thinking like, why have I decided to do this? This is insane. That's the time when you have to think like, actually, no, like this is the reason that I'm doing it. And for Pirate Queen, it was very much a friend of mine told me the story, and she was like, did you know that it was a woman who was the most powerful pirate in history? And I was like, no, that's not true. And she was like, no, it was. It was a woman in 19th century China who married a leader of a fleet. And when he mysteriously died, she took over and commanded about 70,000 people during the lead up to the Opium Wars. And I was just so shocked that, one, I didn't know about it. Two, we weren't taught about the Opium Wars at school. It's not something that we know about. And three, like, not only did she command this fleet, but she actually paved the way for gender equality, and she built this code of laws that meant that men and women had to be treated equally on her fleet in 19th century China. Like, ridiculous. And I was like, this is just incredible. And with Ben's and Trailblazer, it was one of those that I wish I could say that I found the story in like a really interesting way. And I was like hiking through the Black Forest in Germany, and I came across this house and I met this woman, and she like told me this incredible story, and I was like, oh my God. But the reality was that I literally found it on Wikipedia, and I was just researching. I was researching for another project, and I was like, this is extraordinary. And similar thing, I was just so shocked and in awe of the fact that someone like stole her husband's invention and went on the world's first road trip. Like, that's insane. And it's so incredible. And I just think that like history has always been very much a space where we learn about, you know, Henry VIII or William Wallace, and that's great. But I think there's also space to make space, you know. And I think that VR is such a great medium to do that. And so are games. Like, I don't know, my brother is like the biggest history nerd because he plays so many games, and growing up we played a lot of Age of Empires, and that really inspired me to like tell narratives that have historical elements to it, because it's such an amazing use of education and like interweaving storytelling and education. I thought that was really cool. So I guess that's what drove me to do it.
Definitely. So it's an amazing idea. I love the story, but how did you go about getting the funding for that? Tell us some of the bits there, because I know you told me some stuff the other day, and it's cool because you're going and you're pitching a crazy idea and you're saying, hey, there's this person that nobody knows about doing this thing that nobody realized. So I want to turn it all on its head and create a VR story out of it.
It was kind of wild. Like with Pirate Queen, it was an interesting one because we got this funding, like this grant, which was a tiny grant. I'll happily say publicly, we got literally 25 grand from Creative England, which was amazing at the time, and I adore them, and I'm so grateful for that funding. But we made this tiny prototype, and then we started taking it out, and we got nominated for an award with Rain Dance, and then we won like best debut at Rain Dance, and we were like, oh my God, this is amazing. Like, people are gonna like this, and it's an amazing story, and it's a great project, and like we have all the things. And then we started showing it to publishers and everyone's, and like funds and all of the, you know, everyone that technically could have said yes to the project. And the response was all the same. It was just like, stay in your lane. Like, know that you are a filmmaker. You don't even know what Unreal was, which actually technically at the time I had learned. So, you know, but it was like, you don't belong in this world. This isn't your space. And everyone said the same thing, which was like, we're not going to take the risk on you. And it was really disheartening and really difficult to hear. And by coincidence, we got introduced to Meta and like jumped on a call with them. And it was the complete opposite. And they literally just turned to us and they were like, in the first meeting, they were like, yeah, we'll fund this to be a full game. It was, and I don't know, it's a funny one because Meta is such a like big organization, and there are lots of people there. And the thing that I've learned the most is that within the organization, there are people who genuinely really care, and they're incredible human beings who I am very honored to now call friends. And they really believed in me at a time where no one else did, and I wasn't running a game studio. Like I could pull it together, but you know, I didn't come from this world, and they sort of rolled the dice and took a risk on someone that they really didn't need to. And I think I'm always going to be very, very grateful for them for that, because it was quite a unique thing to have done at the time. So I guess it's one of those, it's like a no doesn't mean that the project's wrong. It just means that you're not finding the partner who's right for you, I think.
Yep.
And that's always a really good lesson, because this industry, again, it's like it's full of setbacks all of the time, and everyone says no all of the time. We get no's every single day. And it's ironic because like you think at a certain point that it's gonna stop, and you're like, we're Emmy nominated, and we've worked with these people, and we've done these things, and yet it still happens. And I know people who have won Oscars, and like I've been in the car with someone who's won many Oscars, and she was on the phone receiving a no for a project, and it just happens. Like it's part of life. So I think it's just about remembering that it's not personal, and it just means that the partnership isn't right. It's not you. It's just there's a better partner out there for you.
Yeah, I think this was one of the lessons I learned. And in fact, a VC told me this many, many years ago, long time ago now. But particularly in that world of funding where you're out and you're looking for something, it's this weird thing, because there's the sort of side that they're all out on stage and they're telling you what it takes to get ready and all of these kinds of things. But actually, there is a risk aversion to VCs that most people don't think about. And this is true in a lot of funding situations generally. And the very simple thing they said was, investors are always looking for a reason to say no. And it sort of seems counterintuitive when you hear that, because you think, well, hold on a second, I've got this amazing idea, I've got this great team, we're sitting on this incredible stuff. And yet they're just looking for anything to say no, because they're trying to tick every little checkbox on their checklist that they don't want to tell you about. And if they find anything on that checklist that gives them doubt, then for them, they think they're just taking too much of a risk in what is already a risk environment. And that does lead to this sort of it can be this feeling of rejection all the time. Why am I working so hard at this? Why am I pushing so much to try and find this money when nobody else will believe in me? And you found it, you had the stay in your lane moments. In my world, a lot of it was around, we were doing deep tech, and finding anyone to fund deep tech is like, I mean, that is its own job. And we always used to say, you kiss a lot of frogs, right? You have to go through a lot of those meetings to find that person that believes in you. And then when that happens, you can suddenly feel like you're moving forward and you're getting those moments. But the other thing you said in there, I think is one of the other lessons, is there's lots of other ways to find money, and there's lots of things that can help you get there. And sometimes what sounds like a small amount can be so important to move the company forward. Grant funding comes in many different forms from many different regions, and you can find local areas doing grants, you can find national grants, you can find international grants. You can also find grants across different industries. And those grants help you just keep topping those things up. And one of the negatives I've always personally found, but I often hear, is people don't like to do grants because they're actually hard work. And one of the things that we learned was it's worth having someone whose job is to just do the grants. If you take somebody and get that person, even if it's a contract or part-time, and they're taking some portion of the grant in payment, the rest of the grant is still free money to you effectively. And it's a great way to be able to generate not just sort of 10,000 here and 10,000 there, but in some cases, hundreds of thousands, if not more, in grants. And it's worth researching and finding those. I don't think you can underestimate credits, grants, R&D tax credits. In our case, were incredibly valuable because we were a tech company. And all of those things, you suddenly realize as you grow and scale, just how much of a difference it makes to running your team, running your organization.
Totally. And also, I didn't realize the power that grants have in terms of soft marketing. I think that's the thing that people really underestimate, is that if you think about the BFI and I don't know, like all of these public funds that do have grants, the amount of followers that they have on social media is huge, huge. And like you would be paying quite a lot of money to a PR firm to be getting those numbers of eyeballs. Whereas if you get a grant, then you can build the relationship with the organization that you're working with and then ask them to be supporting you on socials. And the reach is massive. So it's like there's a lot of soft benefits to funding and grants as well as the actual cash.
Yes. And I think that leads into another one of them, which is networking. Being out there, being present is so important. When you're the face of your company, you're that person that everyone has to see. But it is so important for that connection to take you to the next person and the next person. And sometimes somebody can open a door for you that you've been unable to open.
Yeah, it's so true. It's definitely, I mean, we had that recently with a project where we pitched the project directly to someone. And they said no. They were like, we're not interested. This is like, they literally were just like, this is a waste of our time and this is not interesting to us. And then we went to a partner and they pitched it to the company and they were like, this is the best thing that we've ever seen since sliced bread. I'm not even joking. So it's one of those that I think, yeah, I agree with you. It's sort of, don't underestimate how important your network is and how important connections and relationships are, because it's relationships that will more often than not open doors, which is both frustrating and it can be frustrating, but it can also be a good thing because it means that you can kind of try and go different ways to get the opportunities that you're looking for.
So tell me a bit about, so one of the things that we had that we were talking about was setting up your studio. It was like the importance of, you have an idea, you go out, first thing, go set up a business, right? Just go file as a limited company, make it happen. It is so important because suddenly, kind of to the point of funding and all the rest of it, it makes you look real. And it also makes it easier to access certain things in your business accounts. But tell us a little bit about sort of your early days of setting things up and just how you went about some of that.
I definitely think it was a happy accident when I first set up my company. It was one of those that a friend of mine was like, oh, I really want to make a movie. And I was like, oh, well, I kind of want to produce a movie. And so we started working together on this project. And I realized quite quickly into it. I was like, well, probably need to set up a company in order to do this. And then we need to find like an accountant and a lawyer and like actually build out into a real entity. And I think, yeah, one of my sort of big lessons in the really early days was there's no better time to set up a company than at the beginning. And it really doesn't actually cost that much to do so, but building your infrastructure of like making sure that you have good lawyers on board, that you have a good accountant on board that can like help you run it is really important. And also you don't actually, I found it mad that like no one ever tells us how to do these things. Like you don't get taught how to do it unless you go and do like an MBA or something, but I didn't. And so I genuinely had no idea. And I think there's like all of the ideas of the misconceptions of running a business. Everyone assumes that you know what you're doing. And I genuinely, all the way through, I think my career has just been a series of mistakes, which I've learned from. But the important thing is just to not be afraid to ask for help. I think there's this idea that you can't ask for help because it makes you look weak or that you don't know what you're doing, when the reality is that a lot of people don't know what they're doing, and that's okay. And like accepting that there are things that you don't know is normal. Like you're not, unless you're trained as a lawyer, you're not going to be a lawyer. Like it's okay to ask and be like, I'm really sorry, I actually don't understand what this means. And people really love giving advice, and it's a good way of building relationships is to ask for advice. I think there's a really good book actually called Never Split the Difference, which is all about like negotiation. And if you haven't read it and you're running a business, then I highly recommend reading it because it just gives you a lot of tools. And sort of circling back to that idea of like everyone loves saying no, that's true. And this book kind of leans into how you can actually use no's to your advantage and like what you can do differently to, I don't know, a case in point is like we reached out to an actor once who said no to the project. And then we reached out again and we were like, is there anything that we can do to change their mind? And then eventually after 2 more no's, they said yes. So it's kind of one of those that like a no doesn't always mean no. And it sort of ties in, I guess, with asking for help isn't a weakness. Like it's just a strength that will allow you to be a better leader, I think. Like you have to accept that you don't know everything and that's okay.
Yeah, I advise for a couple of startups, and I was speaking to one of them recently, and they said to me, they bounced something off of me, and I answered the question and gave them a story of something that had happened in one of my startups. And they said, can you just write all of this down for me? Can you put down on paper everything, like all of this kind of things that you've learned? I just remember saying, no, it's like there's 3 decades of this stuff. It's like, I'm not really ready to go write a book on all of this. And a lot of the stuff I guarantee I will forget until you ask me anyway. It's not until you hit that particular problem. But I think one of the things from that and this lesson and how asking for help is important, because we don't all have the answers, but we have experience, and that experience can lead us to potentially navigate the answers, or through the networking side of things, know where to go next to find the answer. And a lot of this comes about from just sort of those early days of setting things up. And as you learn to each bit, when you talk about lawyers, right, every time I read a legal document, I'm always still to this day in awe of the language. And quite often, despite no end of contracts or legal documents I've read, I have to go ask questions about, what does this mean? Why is this one in Latin? Why is it all he throughout? Can't we change that or fix all of these? And those sorts of basic things that you go through. But you start with, set your company up. Go find a piece of accounting software. It's cheap and they're really easy to use, right? They literally write thing in, money goes out. And it starts to get you into that mindset of, oh, the next thing I've done is I've hired someone. Now I have to add them into the payroll section. And you start to work through, or I have to raise an invoice. And you have this software out there. There's lots of options now. We used to use things like Xero and others, but and Charlie HR for setting up your people things. As you grow, you suddenly realize you're at 10 people and you need to start being a little bit more organized in how you do things. We had a moment early on where we'd set up the bank account, and then a couple of years in, my chief of operations calls me up and says, I think money's missing from the account. And we learned through, because we'd set the systems up, we could go through, and sure enough, somebody shouldn't have been taking money out of the account, was taking money out of the account. We phone the investors up and they're saying, oh yeah, that's happened to some of our other startups as well. It's like, why did nobody tell us this? The thing we'd been missing was multiple locks on our bank accounts, but also having multiple people able to access our bank accounts. So a single person could take as much money as they wanted if you weren't paying attention. These are the sort of things you kind of need to figure out as you're growing and scaling, but also, how do I set up a bank account? How do I set up a business bank account? How do I go find a lawyer? How do I go find an accountant, a bookkeeper? Just ask. Start to bounce those things off of people, and you'll find quickly there's lots of, like you say, everyone wants to give advice, usually because they've made a mistake somewhere along the line. And it's like, don't do what we did. Do it this way. Make sure you lock your bank accounts.
Yeah. My advice, by the way, for you on that would be, there's a piece of software called Pleo, Pleo, and it's really good. And instead of giving people access to your bank accounts, you can move money from your bank account into Pleo and then give access to Pleo. And then it shows like you're giving access to like certain people, and it shows who's paying, like who's buying what. And so it'll be like, I don't know, Eloise bought this today and Sarah bought this or whatever it is. And then you can monitor it so that no one has direct access to a bank account, and you control how much money you move in. So
yeah, I like that. I don't know if Pleo was around. I could have done with Pleo at the time. It was that was a messy day, I can tell you.
Yeah.
Although funny enough, and sort of when you asked for advice, and the sort of the follow-on to what happened there was we had been embezzled. We'd been embezzled for quite a bit of money. And we figured out what had happened. The police got involved. We had to call all the investors. And we were in the middle of a fundraising round, really big fundraising round. And I'm just sitting there thinking, we're hosed. Nobody is going to invest in these idiots who can't even manage their bank account. And I remember calling the investor, and I'll tell you, it was Intel's investment team. And I called them up and I said, this has happened. And I need to tell you because we're in the middle of the investment. We're close to closing. And I remember Abdul just turning around and he said, so, okay, walk me through the last 48 hours, everything you've done. What have you learned? What have you put in place since then? I had been to the police. I'd run up the road. I'd closed accounts. I'd changed access. We'd moved a load of things around. We'd changed our accounting procedures, everything. The number of things we had done in the last sort of 48 hours was astonishing. And he just turned around and he said, you're a startup and mistakes happen. He said, I care about how you respond to mistakes. He said, everyone makes mistakes. This is one of the big lessons. Learning from your mistakes is what they care about. Yeah. And they care that you're going to be able to react, to look after things and do things correctly. And he said, we were Series A at the time. He said, you now look like most of our Series C companies with how you've got everything set up. He said, you've learned some hard lessons. And he said, and by the way, he said, you don't even want to ask me how much that Intel has lost to fraud over the years if you think what you've had is a bad day. And I just remember thinking, and I was so humbled and thankful for his response and his reaction, because I'd had 48 hours without sleep. I thought everything was going to fall apart. And it turned out that it was just, again, it was just that sort of asking, letting people know, being honest and transparent about what happened. But also, you've got, when you're building a team, and this sort of leads into our next point, I had really good people around me and they supported me, we supported each other. And that helped us navigate a very turbulent week. And it also gave me the strength to be able to go and make those calls and those difficult moments and come back in. And we turned what was an incredibly difficult situation into an amazing learning experience. And every startup I ever work with now, or I speak to, I talk them through some of these basics because of this. And that was fostered from just sort of the learning that came from that and taking it, saying, okay, let's be better. What else do we need to do? What other processes do we need to do to fix those kinds of things? Pleo, a great example.
Pleo, a great example. But totally, I mean, I guess that's the thing. I don't believe that there's such a thing as failure. I think failure, the only time that you fail is if you don't try. That's a failure. But aside from that, making mistakes isn't a failure. It's just part of learning. And it's okay to make mistakes. It happens. Life happens. And I don't know, it sounds like you found a good partner because they completely understood the situation and dealt with it in a really professional and very professional way with kindness as well. And I think that, I mean, we had something not similar, but our Instagram got hacked at the beginning of the year and sent out loads of messages to loads of our partners and associates with this weird hacky scam that happens all the time. But as a result, I sort of had to reach out and be like, listen, I'm so sorry, please ignore this message. Not one person came back and said, you should have done better, or, that was awful. They were just like, oh, I'm really sorry to hear that. We're here to support if you need anything. And actually, it sort of, again, when those challenges happen, it does a lot of the time, it brings you closer to the people who you should be working with because they totally understand and the relationship actually goes stronger. It's a bit I don't know if it sounds very gruesome, but if you've ever broken a bone, but when that bone heals, it heals a lot stronger than before. And I think it's so telling. That's a sign of a good partnership or a good relationship is when you can build stronger together.
Yes. And on that, so how do you think about team? What are some of your sort of core things you're looking for as you're building those team and those people around you?
I think it's so defining of can you be in the trenches together? It's really interesting. I mean, it's one of those that, like, when things go wrong, how do you work together to fix it? If you're starting to sort of point fingers, then it's a sign that actually maybe the people on your team aren't quite right, or you need to, I don't know. I've made a lot of interesting hires, and some have been amazing and some have been huge mistakes. And again, that's part of being a startup. I think when you first start and you're so scrappy and you're like, oh, I'm just like, this person knows how to post on Instagram, so I'll like bring them in to be the social media manager, when actually they have no training whatsoever. Or like, this person once did this thing on a film and it works, so let's hire them to manage this. And like, it leads to a lot of learnings. I think for me, the biggest thing that I've learned with building a team is there are small things like, I don't know, attention to detail is like a massive one. I think there's a really good saying, which is focus on the 1%, which is like everyone can kind of create the 99% of what something should be, but it's that 1% of detail that actually makes the difference. And that's something that I really think about a lot, is like, are you focusing on the small details that are actually going to make something sing? So that would probably be a big one, but I think it's about it really is about passion. I know that sounds really cliche, but I think we're driven to do things that we believe in. And if we're a team and we're working together and we believe in something together, then you always know that people are going to like care. And it kind of comes down to caring. So it's an interesting one. I've never hired, unless it's a very technical role. So for example, a CTO or a programmer or something like that, then obviously you want to hire with a specialized skill set. But for those that are maybe more production-based roles or like new entry roles, there's never been for me like a barrier to entry with a skill set. It's always been, why do you want to do this? Like, what is it about this role that will help you and benefit you moving forward? And can we, like, if we can align on that, then that's like a perfect way to build a team and a relationship. I think something that's really interesting that I'm noticing is like an ability to take and give feedback is like a very defining trait. Like, if you can give, I like fundamentally believe in constructive feedback, and I love receiving constructive feedback because I think it makes me a better human. Like, no one is perfect, but I think being able to take feedback is really defining to building a team and being able to grow as a human. So that's probably the big one for me.
Yes. Yeah. I think it's funny, I've made some, and everyone makes hiring mistakes, and I think that's in the nature. And one of the things that I've been through, hyperscaling, we took a team from 5 to 90 in 9 months, an engineering team once. I don't recommend anyone does that.
Yeah.
But somehow we managed to do it in a way that built just an incredible team. It was a very Silicon Valley type of approach to things, but it was amazing. I remember there were a couple of great sort of hiring stories that came out of it, and you talk about sort of looking for those people with passion. We were looking for a community manager, and we had all of these people that were coming in. This was sort of mid 2000s, so it was before we really had that idea of all the influencer type marketing at that point. We were still just sort of really starting to grow things, but we had lots of forums and connections, and we had people coming in who had worked in large companies. They'd run forums for companies, and they had all the attributes. And then we had this guy who came in, and he had no background in technology companies or anything else, but he was an incredible people person. And he had taken kids up to base camp at Everest, and he worked in all kinds of charities. He is part of the Star Wars charity, where they dress up and they go to the hospitals for sick kids, and incredible costumes. And I just remember going in and saying, this is the person we need to hire. He gets people, he understands people, and he understands how to treat and talk to people. And there was a bunch of negativity around hiring him, and we got him in. This guy called Nate Barsetti, and Nate won't mind me telling this story because he's a wonderful human being. But we hired him, and immediately he changed the voice of the company and how we talk to people. And he went on, and still to this day is an incredibly successful leader of people, creates amazing communities around him. And it was absolutely wonderful building that kind of thing. But the thing that for me, it's always, to your point, are they passionate? Do they believe? Do they want to follow on this journey? And are they curious? Do they want to keep learning? And I had a wonderful email a couple of days ago, actually, from one of the people that was early at Polystream. And he was there for several of our, 3 or 4 of our early years. And he said it's just since then he's gone on, he's senior architect roles at places like Microsoft and others, very, very incredible, skilled, talented engineer. And he just said those early years at Polystream were his best years of his career, because the team, the people, the problem we were trying to solve and everything we were trying to do just gave him that just belief that we were doing something amazing. And he said the rest of it wouldn't have happened if he hadn't done Polystream. And it was kind of, you look back on some of the things, and like we said earlier, we take the knocks, but you get something like that and you go, actually, no, that was why we do it. And those are the moments that matter.
Totally. And I think there are fluke moments in this, like in anyone's career, but it's the opportunities that come from it that are really extraordinary. Like, I was doing a podcast called Women Behind the Scenes, and there was a woman who came on I was interviewing her, and she had just exec produced and co-wrote a small movie that I'm sure no one's ever heard, called All Quiet on the Western Front. And it was part of her BAFTA Oscar campaign, and we were interviewing her, and we just connected so well. And at the end, this woman, Leslie Patterson, came up to me, and bear in mind, I'm really tall, I'm nearly 6 foot, and Leslie is like 5'3", and she came up to me and she like looked up at me and she was like, we need to find something to do together. And I was like, oh yeah, that would be lovely. And in my head, I was like, this woman is like been nominated for 1 million BAFTAs and Oscars. She's probably just being very nice and polite. Not realizing at the time that Leslie, when she says something, she means it. Like, that woman is extraordinary. She's an absolute powerhouse. And so then she, I was like, oh, lovely, yeah, that would be incredible. And then she went on to win like all of the BAFTAs, all of the Oscars. I was sitting there on the sofa, like waving, being like, woo, go Leslie, I met her once. And then cut to about a year later, and I was on a flight to LA for the Emmys for Pirate Queen, and there was this blonde woman sitting in front of me on the flight, and I was like, and so I tapped her on the shoulder, and I was like, Leslie. And she was like, oh my God, you interviewed me for a podcast a year ago for All Quiet. And I was like, yeah. And she was like, we need to find something to do together. Like, I meant it. And I was like, okay. And so we literally had dinner the next night, and I said, I'm working on this project. It's called Trailblazer. We're about to attach Daisy Ridley to it. Like, do you want to come on board? And she was like, absolutely. Like, I'm in 100%. So I don't know. I think there's serendipity, but there's also like making the most out of every situation you're in. And I couldn't, there would have been an alternate universe where I didn't tap her on the shoulder on that flight, and who knows what would have happened. But I think there's something magical about, just making the most of the occurrences that happen.
Yeah, I think that's we've talked about the importance of like networking and good people and being good people, right? And being good to other people. I mean, this all sounds sort of very crunchy, but at the same time, these connections matter. These connections lead to the next thing and the next thing. And so whether you call it serendipity or luck or however you look at it, I often think, and I often say to people, I feel I've been very lucky in my career, but I've tended to leap into things like insane things. I've just looked at them and gone, whatever, we're going to do it. Let's see what happens next.
Yeah.
And those are the moments that sort of, you've got to take those chances. Like you said, if you don't do it, then you've already written the story. It's not going to happen. If you take those chances, you leap into those things. I remember saying, I'd spent some long stints out in California, and I kept coming back and saying, I will never move there. There's absolutely no chance that I'm going to move. It's insane over there. And then I went out I was doing some work out there. I got into a heated discussion with one of the director of engineering at the time of Sun Microsystems, and they say, and we got told to take it out the room, and so she took me back up to her office, and she just sat me down, and she was like 3 levels senior to me, and she said, "Look, I get where you're coming from. I get why you're pushing the way you're pushing, but you're not doing it quite right. But all of that said, do you want to come work for me? I need a senior engineering manager. I need someone to come out here. I need one of my teams taken over. Do you want a job?" And she offered me a job there and then. And I remember thinking, oh, no. And I flew back and I said, "I've been offered a job in California. I can't be that person that says no to a job in California. It's like, that will live with me forever. So
Yeah.
just go out for a year or 2. It'll be fine." And I ended up out there for 12 years. So
Amazing.
sometimes you just have to take those things. And again, it was luck, but the luck came from I'd already put myself in situations to go out there. I was pushing, and I was building those connections. And the next thing happened, and it feels like in some ways some luck, but also embracing those moments, grabbing them, finding good people, asking questions, pushing on things, and just make stuff happen. And then before you know it, who knows, you'll be in California or sitting on a plane, and that person in front of you is now coming on board your project because
Yeah.
you just made that connection. So that's the value, and that's what comes from building those relationships. It's so important.
Yeah. And you make your own luck, you know? Like if I hadn't have made Pirate Queen, I never would have been on that flight. So actually,
Yep.
was it luck? I don't
Yep.
know.
Amazing. You talked a little bit about the value of constructive criticism and sort of how you give and take feedback, but sort of talk a little bit about how you get everyone on board, getting the team together and sort of getting everyone into the same space.
Yeah, I think it's an interesting one because our studio, we kind of dip and dive between being remote and then being in an office, depending on where we're at and what we do. But one thing that we did for Pirate Queen that was very different, I think, and worked really nicely, and we did it for Trailblazer as well, is this idea of we sort of took a lot of skills that we learned from film and then combined it with the games industry. So in film and TV, you have a writer's room. Like you design a room where you bring in that like all of the writers, and then you craft the story together, and it's a very intense process. And it can last, sometimes it lasts a couple of days, sometimes it can last like 20 weeks. And so it sort of varies, but it builds a sense of community and creative cohesion. And it's a really fundamental thing that you do at the beginning of a project. And so we took that and decided that we would do the same for Pirate Queen and Trailblazer, but instead of just having writers, we brought in our team. So we brought in our designer and our lead programmer and our lead artist, and got everyone, and obviously our narrative designer and myself, and we got everyone into this room to design the game together. And so it meant that instead of a game being very much like mechanics led first or narrative led first, we actually realized that building the mechanics and the narrative in tandem was like the best approach to how we wanted to tell the story. And as a result, I think there's a really interesting thing of this concept of allowing people to have a creative buy-in, again, builds their investment into a project, and they feel like they're really part of that team. And so when you give people the opportunity to do that and to voice their opinions and to share their insights, then not only are you crafting like a lot more of a holistic game or story or experience, but like you are crafting your team at the same time, and that sort of autonomy feels really, really important. So I think it was a really interesting learning for us of giving people the space to input. And as a result, we made something that people like our team really believed in. And that was really lovely.
Yes, yeah. I used to find it's we would bring everyone together regularly for just whiteboard sessions. Sometimes we would think through a problem, and we would often just get everyone together. And it's one of those things where people talk about it, and yet I don't think as many people do it as should. And we used to get everyone together and we'd just say, right, we need to work through some ideas. We want everyone to have a voice in this. And we would make sure we would work very hard to give everyone their opportunity. We had some people who weren't that forthcoming. We had some people who always had strong opinions on things. So you always try to balance it and manage it. But it led to absolute moments of breakthroughs in technology that might not otherwise have happened. We built incredible tooling because somebody was stuck with something and somebody else would say, well, what if we tried this? We built incredible pieces of tech stack that nobody has ever seen before, just by somebody going, well, what if we try this? And nobody was afraid to throw ideas out and try things. And so we would have these little moments of hacking things, pushing things together, and we'd just run these experiments to see if it worked. And if it didn't work, it was no harm, no foul, but we knew, and again, we'd learned from something, right? Funny enough, actually, one of our most frustrating moments in the grants process, I would say, which was we had written a grant too specifically. So this is a little bit of grant warning for everyone. We had written a grant so specifically, it included a very complex mathematical technique, Ray-Ban fingerprinting, that we were trying to use to solve a particular compression problem. We had this great Innovate grant. We were trying to do it. And about halfway through, we realized that wasn't going to work. And we actually found a better solution to the problem. And we went back to Innovate and said, we're not going to do that anymore. The trouble that caused us with Innovate, that we weren't going to continue down this path that was wrong, and we had a better path. And that took several months of negotiating. So with hindsight, we should have just said, and we're going to use compression algorithms to do this, not been so specific about what it was we were doing. So again, get a good grant writer if you're going to do these things. But that's, I know we're coming to the end. I did see at least one question. Somebody said, Valerie said, I'd like to know a little bit more about R&D tax credits for tech businesses. Fascinating topic, I can tell you. I have endless hours of fun with R&D tax credits. I'll put it very simply, because I'm not an accountant. Go get an accountant or go and get an R&D specialist. But quite simply, what it is, if you are working on something that is pre-production, that is prototyping, research and development, you can offset that against your outgoings and your revenues. So depending what stage you're in, it doesn't matter if you're pre-revenue, you can still take advantage of R&D tax credits, and they're insanely valuable. I don't know the current number, so I'm not going to tell you exactly what it is, but it used to be somewhere around, depending if you're pre-revenue, it's a smaller number, but you're suddenly getting effectively your 100,000, another 20,000 is coming back effectively, and you file your tax credits every few months. So you just need to make it part of your process. Your accountant can do it for you, or you get an R&D person to do it for you, and they'll file them. If you're making revenue, they're actually worth even more. So all of your development costs get pumped in through your R&D tax credits, and they come back. I know, would I be right in saying Yuki has some advice around this?
Yeah, definitely. I'll send a link over shortly to a need to know video that we have, and include that in the recording. So yeah.
Cool. Does anybody have any other questions they wanted to throw out there?
We do have a question in the Q&A box for Eloise from Tracy. Tracy's asking, do you think being a female founder is a blessing or a curse, particularly when fundraising or promoting a product? What do you reckon, Eloise?
Oof, that's a good question. It's a very big question. It's an interesting one, because I think if I was not a woman, I would not have had the funding from Meta, because they at the time were giving funds to female-led studios on diverse narratives, and we checked literally every single box. But at the same time, the amount of no's that I've had for funding definitely supersedes the yeses, and I have never had funding without a male partner on board the project, which I think is very telling. I'm very, very lucky that I have an amazing exec producer, Dave Ranyard, who completely understands this. And so he'll literally just like sit on calls as the white man in the room, and I will go through and pitch, and he will be there as the presence. And it's very similar with my CFO as well. He completely gets it and finds it ridiculous. So I think I've learned that every time I walk into a room, I'm going to be underestimated because I'm a woman. It's unfortunate, but it is kind of the way that it is, sadly. And so you just have to lean into the fact that you're going to be underestimated. And so you have to work a lot harder to then prove why you shouldn't be underestimated. And as a result, I think that actually you kind of have to turn it into a bit of a superpower, and sort of, yeah, lean into it in a way. So is it a blessing? Is it a curse? I think it's probably both. But you just have to find your way through it. That's, yeah, I don't know if that's helpful.
Well, I would say anyone that underestimates you, Eloise, more fool them, because I think the things you're doing are wonderful. I love the projects you've been building, and I'm very excited for Trailblazer, and I'm also very excited to see what's happening next. So I just think it's fantastic. So more power to you.
Thank you. That's really kind.
Absolutely wonderful. Well, thank you so much, Eloise, and thank you so much, Bruce, as well. It's been
Thank
really,
you
really
much, Bruce.
fascinating listening to both of you.